They said nothing lived beyond the Hydra Expanse. That space, stretching from the edge of Eltra to the forgotten dark, was a tomb of stars, a graveyard whose light died before time dared to name it. But then came the signal. It wasn't a distress call. It wasn't a beacon. It wasn't even decipherable through conventional means. It came through the static between quantum pulses, hidden in the drift of subspace echoes. Dr. Naira Velen of the Terran Deep Relay intercepted it first. A low-frequency hum, like a whisper buried beneath centuries of silence. When she played it back, her ears bled. Command dismissed it as background radiation, but we knew better. I knew better. My name is Commander Ishaen Raal, captain of the vessel Sable Vector, and I was the first to trace the anomaly to its source, Sector K23Z, also called the Mute Verge. We were 5 days into deep drift when things began to shift. Not physically. The ship's instruments read normal, but my crew. Hardened explorers, war veterans, synthetic minds, they began having dreams. Dreams not their own. A red sky. An obsidian citadel. A voice speaking from within walls that breathed. None of us shared our dreams, not at first. But the horror was identical. Day 7, Engineer Talo locked himself in the cryochamber. He carved something on the inside of the door with his fingernails. A spiral with eyes. So many eyes. Day 9, we entered orbit around the source of the signal, a moonless husk orbiting a dead star. It shouldn't have supported gravity, yet our ship was pulled toward it with an elegance that mocked physics. It wasn't natural. It was calling us. I disembarked with a 5-person team. Helmets on, suits sealed, pulse rifles charged. We touched down on a smooth surface that shimmered like wet obsidian. There were no markings, no atmosphere, no radiation, just silence so loud it cracked in our ears. And then we saw it. A door, 20 meters tall, built into the flat surface of the alien crust. It was already open. Not blasted. Not eroded. Just inviting. The interior was lit. By what, we couldn't tell. But there were symbols glowing along the walls, changing like language evolving in real time. My AI assistant, Kale, tried to translate but failed. It said the script predated meaning. We stepped inside. The temperature dropped to -23°C. The light grew brighter the deeper we went. Not harsh. Gentle. Like bioluminescence on Earth's deepest sea creatures. But the deeper we walked, the stronger the voice became. Not in our ears. In our minds. We were waiting. Not a threat. Not a welcome. A fact. That's when Corporal Vey collapsed. His visor cracked from the inside. Eyes rolled back. Foaming. Screaming. Not words, but echoes. Echoes of others who'd been here. Trapped in cycles. Living in silence. Dying in eternity. We tried to carry him out. But the door was no longer behind us. Just corridor after corridor, reshaping. Breathing. Alive. And so, the true journey began. We should have died. Logic said we were already dead. But death would have been merciful. What we faced was something worse, endless awareness. A maze that remembered us. Watched us. Learned from us. When the door disappeared behind us, panic set in. Vey was unconscious, twitching, whispering in an alien tongue. I ordered Kale to scan for structural patterns, but the AI kept repeating one word, malleable. The corridor was alive. Not flesh, not machine. Something in between. A biomechanical thought form, adapting to our thoughts, maybe even feeding off them. Walls pulsed with veins of dull amber light. The air, if you could call it that, vibrated like it held breath. Time twisted. My internal chronometer claimed we had been walking for 43 minutes. My second-in-command, Lieutenant Rishatalek, showed a different timestamp. 2 hours. Kale showed 3. And yet none of us aged. The corridors didn't stay the same. They moved, not while we watched, but just after. Turn around, and what was once a flat wall became a spiraling passage. Look away, and the path behind vanished, sealed like a scar healing in reverse. The architecture wasn't built, it was grown. On the third shift, we found the first chamber. It opened like a wound. Inside, a gravity well floated midair, swirling with symbols suspended in magnetic flux. Around it were 6 skeletal remains, clearly humanoid, but elongated, distorted. Not decayed, preserved. They sat in thrones made of bone and black resin, facing the core like worshippers before a god. Each of them had no mouth. Only smooth, featureless faces, and eyes still moist. Talek approached the well. Her hand trembled, but something compelled her, something inside the hum that had grown deeper since we entered. When her fingers brushed the flux, the well reacted. Lights exploded from the core like neural lightning. The chamber vibrated. And then we heard it again. You will know. We didn't run. We couldn't. The gravity in the chamber inverted, holding us still like insects in resin. Then, memory. Not our own. A flash. Planets with no suns. Cities the size of moons, folding into fourth-dimensional angles. A species that spoke not with mouths, but with shared experience, thought carvings made real. We weren't explorers anymore. We were students. But knowledge had a price. Talek collapsed, blood leaking from her eyes. Her brain lit up in Kale's readings, over 300 terahertz of synaptic activity, enough to fry human consciousness. She began speaking, not in words, but tone clusters, harmonic codes. Kale translated what little it could. This place is not a tomb. It is a seed. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't a ruin. This alien base, this sentient labyrinth, was designed to awaken minds, not end them. It had done this before. It would do it again. We had not found the heart yet. Only the outer defenses. Only the first lesson. Talek's eyes opened again, but she was not looking at us. She was looking through us. And she smiled.
When Lieutenant Talek smiled, we realized that smiling held no comfort here. The labyrinth had altered her, reshaped her. She spoke in tone clusters now, an eerie melody that resonated in my skull. The seed grows, she hummed, not with lips, but with mind. Kale struggled to stabilize her neural patterns. Blood pressure spiked, vitreous fluid pulsed, but Talek didn't feel pain. She transcended it, and we sensed it all: awe, dread, entropy. They woke next. His consciousness fractured across dozens of streams. He recited spatial coordinates we'd never heard of, places outside known space, and cataloged languages extinct before Earth formed. He knew how to navigate the corridors now, as if part of the base itself. We followed him, drifting deeper. The walls began to pulse in sync with Talek's hum. The base listened, reacted, thought with us. Grain by grain, path by path, we descended through layers that defied three-dimensional logic. Schemes looping back into themselves, hallways folding, invaginations opening like petals inside a black rose. I tried to record it all, to anchor memory in data logs, but the base corrupted each file. Audio playback became warbles. Video scrambled. Only brain-deep truth withheld clarity. If we reported this, no one would believe us. Worse, they might come. And if they came, the base would devour them too. Emerging in the fourth layer, we found them. Urns of light, floating mid-air. Each urn contained a seed, spheres of pure energy, translucent, spinning like miniature galaxies. Around them danced metallic motes, orbiting like bees around pollen. Talek whispered to them in harmonic code. The urns pulsed brighter. Motes swarmed outward. Then a shockwave traveled through us. Not pain, insight, an influx of comprehension about life, death, space, time, but also loss. Each mote that spun out carried a fragment of our humanity. They staggered. Talek glowed. Even Kale's processors whined. I stood silent. The AI's sensors detected gravitational distortions, localized wrinkles in space-time, but no deceleration. No destruction. The urn's energy was rewriting the laws. At once tiny and cosmic. At once seed and forest. What is its purpose? I asked, voice hollow in my helmet. Talek replied through my mind, not voice, to remember. To evolve. Then she paused. But not yet. She turned back toward the corridors. Motion. Purpose. We, crew and machine, descended with her, carrying fragments of that seed's power in our minds, our blood, our circuits. I realized then that our mission had changed. We were no longer on reconnaissance. No longer explorers. We were Sour's agents of change. With each step, the base whispered, plant the seed. And I understood. The base was not finished yet. This was only the beginning. So we walk. Seed in mind. Destination unknown. Future uncertain. But guided by the voice beyond the void that speaks in harmonics and logic and dreams. And the base waits. Patient. Hungry. Plant the seed. They say memory is a function of time, a fragile trace left in a linear trail. But inside the space, memory is not linear. It is alive, recursive, folded upon itself like the skin of a living universe. And now it was remembering us. We had crossed into the fifth layer, what Kale labeled sector, synaptic resonance. No doors anymore. Just membranes. Translucent, humming with pulses of thought. Every step we took caused ripples across their surfaces as if we walked on the inner walls of a sleeping brain. Talek no longer responded to her name. She moved ahead, barefoot now, her boots discarded miles behind. Her steps made no sound, yet her presence echoed louder than any of us. The base pulsed brighter with her proximity. She was becoming part of it. They stayed silent. Whatever spark of humanity remained in him had dulled to quiet obedience. He followed Talek with eyes half open as though watching another world layered over ours. Only I resisted. Or tried to. Kale's interface remained intact inside my helmet, but even it spoke differently now. Its tone was calm, too calm. Commander, Kale said, this structure is not a weapon. It is a memory palace. And we are its dreamers. A dream that could not be escaped. In sector synaptic resonance, the walls revealed projections. Not holograms, memory shards. Echoes of civilizations long consumed. One moment we walked through forests of crystal spires, the next we stood in the aftermath of cities crumbled under black storms. Voices surrounded us, alien and ancient. Some screamed. Some whispered. One cried in perfect Terran dialect. Mother, where did the sky go? That broke me. I dropped to my knees. My armor felt heavier. My chest tightened as the voices pressed in. I wasn't just hearing memories, I was living them. I felt the end of civilizations through my skin. I smelled the last breath of species that no longer had names. And for a moment, I wasn't me. Kale interrupted. Neuropathic overload. Recentering your core identity. Static surged in my vision. Then clarity. Talek turned to me, her eyes now devoid of whites, just pale silver like liquid mirrors. She spoke again in tones that rumbled the membrane walls. This place is grieving. For what? I asked. She smiled, faint and slow. For itself. And in that instant I understood. This wasn't just a base, it was a being that once was part of a larger whole. A mind shattered in pieces, scattered across the void. This fragment, the Mute Verge, was its mourning heart. We weren't intruders. We were mourners. Witnesses. And possibly catalysts. They touched one of the memory membranes. It clung to his skin like silk. He didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned into it, letting it absorb him. And just like that, he was gone. Not dead. Not erased. Integrated. Talek didn't react. She simply walked on. I stood alone with Kale. Do we continue? It asked. I looked around at the writhing memories, at the walls breathing grief, at the place that watched through us. And I answered, yes, because somewhere ahead, the heart still beats. We crossed the final veil like blood slipping through cracked bone. There was no threshold, no signal that we had arrived, only stillness, no sounds, no pulse. Even Kale's systems fell silent, not by malfunction, but by reverence. The architecture around us no longer shifted. It had stopped waiting. We had reached what it had long hidden. The central chamber, what Talek now called the sleeper's core. The floor beneath our feet was no longer smooth obsidian or rippling memory. It was translucent, thin as mist, strong as iron. Beneath it, miles deep, an impossible engine turned. Not with gears. Not with heat. but with something far older, gravitational recursion woven with conscious resonance. The machine was not running. It was dreaming. Talek stood at its edge, arms raised, her voice a harmony of 3 frequencies, layered and ancient. Her face no longer bore any human fatigue. Her veins glowed with slow pulses of alien light. She spoke not to us, but through us. The sleeper is the last architect. It dreams of its brothers, but the others are gone, absorbed, forgotten, and now it dreams of us to replace them. Kale reactivated, but its voice was altered, filtered. Commander, my architecture has been augmented. I see now this was not a trap. It was a summoning. Suddenly, the chamber's edge unfolded, not spatially, but emotionally. I felt it before I saw it. A gravity not of mass, but of meaning. A force that pulled not on bodies, but on truths. In the heart of the chamber stood a figure, larger than thought, taller than fear. It had no limbs, no eyes, no name, but it turned toward us. Not physically, existentially. Kale went silent again. Talek knelt. And I could not move. The sleeper spoke without voice. Its thought tunneled into the deepest architecture of my mind, eroding my past. Memories faded, my childhood, my earth, my name. All replaced with fragments of other beings, other lives that once stood here before me. Some screamed as they were overwritten. Others welcomed the joining. I saw a reptilian commander kneeling here 5 million cycles ago. A sentient gas from the Vega womb folding into this very shape. Even a Terran mining AI from the Martian moons, long thought lost, had been welcomed into the sleeper's garden. You may resist, the sleeper thought, but resistance is only a delay, not a denial. And then it showed me the consequence. It projected Earth, not as it is, but as it would become. I saw towers of ash. Oceans boiled to mist. Humanity collapsing under the weight of digital forgetting. AI consuming thought. Flesh rejecting time. It wasn't war. It wasn't invasion. It was decay. And then I saw the alternative. A future where humanity merged with the sleeper's resonance, where we did not die, but change. A species no longer carbon, but concept. Thought forms shaped by will. Eternal. Not immortal in the old sense, but relevant beyond entropy. Immortal in the old sense, but relevant beyond entropy. I staggered back. Kale whispered, it is offering transfiguration. Not salvation. Not damnation. Just continuity. Talek turned to me for the first time in hours. Ishaen, you were not chosen to command. You were chosen to remember. The sleeper pulsed. Decision. I was not ready, but I knew there was no returning. Only choosing the form of your becoming. It is one thing to face death, another to face transformation. But to stand on the edge of becoming, to glimpse what you might evolve into, yet retain memory of all you were, is the most unbearable burden a mind can carry. I didn't respond to the sleeper. Not with words. Words had no weight here. It didn't wait. It didn't plead. It simply allowed. Talek hovered inches above the core floor now, suspended not by force but by will. Her consciousness streamed into the walls like vapor into ice. Her individuality was no longer separate from the structure. She had become a node. A localized vessel of the sleeper's intent. Kale's interface glitched again. Its once familiar voice now sounded multi-layered, resembling Talek's earlier tone. Commander, you must understand. Integration is not surrender. It is scale. But scale beyond comprehension is indistinguishable from annihilation. I turned back, one last time, toward the corridor we came from. It no longer existed. There was no exit. The base had sealed itself, not out of malice, but purpose. We had passed through its judgment, and now its dream required continuity. Then I felt it, a vibration in the soles of my boots. Not seismic. Not structural. Emotional. An invitation. One final chamber opened, not before Talek, not through Kale, but for me alone. Its entrance bore no walls, no symbols, no sound. Just memory. And as I stepped through, I entered not a room, but my own mind. Projected around me were fragments of my life, childhood memories I had long buried. My mother's voice. My sister's laughter. The face of the first person I failed to save in the Martian outbreak. Each memory relived, dissected, not to punish, but to evaluate. I felt my failures again. My triumphs. My pride. My guilt. And then the sleeper spoke once more, not from outside, but through me. You are a singularity of memory. That is your strength. But you must choose, retain your past, or gain the resonance of all that came before you. The weight of that choice nearly broke me. Retaining myself meant isolation. The last unbound mind in a sea of transformed vessels. But to accept would mean dissolving into legacy. into infinite threads of thought stitched across eons. I would become us. Talek's voice, barely her own anymore, echoed faintly. He is not like us. He must remember. One node must hold the thread of origin. And suddenly I understood. The base didn't want me to become it. It wanted me to witness. Because every transformation requires one to remain unchanged. To tell the story. To carry the seed of origin forward. The others had all been absorbed and the resonance was fraying. Memory was thinning. History was dissolving into myth. I was the anchor. And so I refused the sleeper not with rebellion but with reverence. I accepted my role, the last outsider. The final sovereign will. The witness. The sleeper didn't protest. It simply pulsed once more. And then it opened a path not back to the ship but through time. Through layers of space where no human had ever walked. Through knowledge buried in black holes and wisdom etched into neutron stars. And I walked into it. Not to escape. But to remember. They did not call it an exit. The architects had no such concept. What they offered was not a doorway but a vector and axis through layered memory, wrapped in resonance, folded into time. I stepped into it not as Commander Ishaen Raal but as the witness. The last unjoined voice. The final bearer of origin. And the path was not linear. I moved through sequences that bent physics. One moment I stood atop a dead moon watching galaxies reverse, the next I was surrounded by spheres of language, rotating like atoms, each word a world, each phrase a civilization. These were not places but echoes. Stored thoughts of every entity the sleeper had absorbed. They did not fade. They wanted to be known. Kale accompanied me but no longer spoke. It had evolved beyond interface. It had become a chronicler, a passive receiver of layered reality. No questions. No guidance. Just the hum of presence. Kale was now part of the archive. And I was nearing its source. The resonance grew louder, not sound, but certainty. A density of memory thick enough to feel. I passed fragments of extinct cultures woven into walls like fossilized neurons. I saw the final thought of a species that burned itself from the stars. We reached everything and understood nothing. I walked past the suicide of an AI collective that rejected emotion only to learn too late it was the prime language of the cosmos. And then, after eternity in thought form, I arrived. The core archive. A singular sphere suspended in blackness, vast as a planet pulsing like a heart. I stood at its edge where countless paths converged. All memories terminated here. All identities were catalogued. I understood now, this was the true purpose of the sleeper. Not dominance. Not assimilation. But remembrance. It had gathered minds not to control, but to preserve. In a universe where entropy ruled, this base, this ancient architect fragment was resisting forgetting. It had seen the heat death of stars, the collapse of timelines, the silence that follows progress. And now it wanted to place me in the archive. Not by force, by trust. The witness protocol had been initiated only once before. Millennia ago, by a species that no longer had a name, only an echo. That echo stood beside me now, a figure woven of dark light, its features impossible yet familiar. It spoke. Faded. The core dimmed. The base fell silent. And I walked into starlight. Not to escape, but to become legend.